As of today, ground handling companies need to provide continuous training to 135,000 employees worldwide annually. Employee retention is one of the biggest challenges that handling organizations are facing. On an annual basis, there are over 20,000 new employees who need to be trained, most of whom are replacements for employees who've left. On average, it takes up to 6 months of training for a new employee to reach full productivity. The overall direct cost of basic training is $50 million per year, almost half of which is incurred in the first 2 weeks. Adding the cost of personnel wages, the overall cost comes close to $200 million. In addition to the cost of the basic training, ground handling personnel training for airline-specific processes costs $75 million per year. To ensure that our people are safe and motivated, and that our operations are running efficiently, requires significant investment in employee training and competency development. To cope with increasing training needs while keeping cost in check, it is essential to make operations training more efficient and standardized across the industry. IATA objectives. One of the Ground Operation Group's strategic objectives is to standardize training requirements for frontline personnel by setting the global minimum safety requirements and reducing the need for the airline's specific training. With that purpose in mind, IATA has worked with all of its stakeholders to develop the Ground Operations Training Program. The training program has been published in the Airport Handling Manual, AHM, as Chapter 11. The Ground Operation Training Program aims to enhance the level of training in ground operations, reduce the amount of specific training modules provided by airlines, reduce training time and costs, and support IATA Ground Operations Manual (IGOM) implementation. The training program has been developed for the industry by ground operations industry experts based on procedures and best practices described in the IGOM, AHM, as well as the IOSA or ISAGO standards and recommended practices, amongst other industry materials. Training Program Scope. The Ground Operations Training Program provides direction and guidance for operators and ground service providers on how to develop training programs, as well as the necessary provisions for ground personnel to perform operational ground functions safely, efficiently, and competently. Structure. AHM Chapter 11 consists of Introduction, Scope and Objectives, Definitions and Terminology, Training Management System, Initial and Continuing Qualification, Training Methods, Assessment Process, Competency Requirements for Trainers, On-the-Job Trainers and Assessors, Training Modules or courses to perform specific tasks, Course syllabi for each module, Training Management System. This system outlines the minimum governance structure that should be adopted. Training Governance, Training Plan, Training Program, Training Material, Training Records, Training Certificates. Training Modules. Training modules have been developed to address operational tasks as defined in the IATA Ground Operations Manual, IGOM. The training program is divided into 3 main areas: passenger services, ramp services, and load control. Each training module defines a description of what the module focuses on, the prerequisites, which training modules need to be completed prior to taking the specific module, the method of training and assessment. Please note that the duration of training is not specified, as it is up to each company to define it as per its own operational needs. Depending on the size and operations of an organization, different job tasks may be defined to meet the company's safety and business needs. Training Implementation Toolkit. To assist each organization with Chapter 11 implementation, IATA has developed a Training Implementation Toolkit. The toolkit is available in the electronic version of the AHM Edition 40. To access it, simply open the application and then click on the banner Toolbox. The toolkit provides you with tools and describes each step to be taken to implement Chapter 11 within your company. It includes 1. AHM Chapter 11 Implementation Guidelines. 2. Gap Analysis Checklists to compare your training with IATA Chapter 11. there is a total of 4 checklists, namely Training Management, Passenger Services Modules, Ramp Services Modules, Load Control Modules. All information entered into the spreadsheet is summarized in the Dashboards tab. AHM Chapter 11 Implementation. In order to implement Chapter 11 effectively and efficiently, IATA recommends following these 4 steps. 1. Perform a gap analysis between the IATA AHM Chapter 11 and the company's training requirements. 2. Align the company's training requirements with IATA Chapter 11. 3. Update the training material. 4. Keep the training content up to date. Step 1. Gap analysis between the training manual of the airline or ground service provider or other company or user and AHM Chapter 11. The Chapter 11 Gap Analysis spreadsheet is the recommended tool to carry out the analysis. Click on the Enable Content icon. This will allow the user to edit information in the checklist. Gap Analysis for Training Management, Tab 2. Columns A and B contain Chapter 11 references as documented in the current Chapter 11 and cannot be edited. Column C allows the user to document the corresponding reference to their own training manual. Column D, Gap Analysis, allows the user to select the appropriate analysis determined after comparing the airline or handler training manual to Chapter 11. Requirements listed not in scope are highlighted or marked in gray. Not in scope means the operator or ground service provider does not perform the function. No further action is required. Requirements in conformity with Chapter 11 are highlighted or marked in green. Conformity means the operator or service provider complies with the specifications contained in Chapter 11. No further action is required. Variations from Chapter 11 will be automatically highlighted in amber. Column E allows the user to list any variations and comments relevant to variations. Gap Analysis for Passenger Services, Tab 3. Row 1 displays job functions. The gap analysis shall be performed for each job function. Columns A and B contain Chapter 11 references as documented in the current Chapter 11 and cannot be edited. Columns C, E, G, I, K, M, O, Q allow the user to document the corresponding reference to their own training manual. Columns D, F, H, J, L, N, P, R Gap Analysis allows the user to select the appropriate analysis determined after comparison of the airline's or handler's training manual versus Chapter 11. Column S allows the user to list any actions and comments relevant to variations. The training courses marked as not required for this function indicate that a specific job function does not have to undergo this type of training, and gap analysis is not required. Field cannot be edited. Checklist for Ramp Services Tab 4 and Load Control Tab 5 are similar. Example of gap analysis between User Training Manual TM 1.22 and PAX 01 for Meet and Greet. The User Training Manual TM 1.22 is in conformity with 1PAX 01, since all steps as outlined have been addressed. The layout and wording in the user manual does not need to be identical. However, at a minimum, the specifications as documented in Chapter 11 shall be addressed in the user manual. On the Gap Analysis spreadsheet, under the Gap Analysis column, select Conformity for the specification being analyzed. Example of gap analysis between User Training Manual and PRM function. The user would not perform PRM function because it is done by the airport as per the airport rules. On the Gap Analysis spreadsheet, under the Gap Analysis column, select Not in Scope. Example of gap analysis between User Training Manual 1.22 and 9PAX 01 for check-in job function. Under the Doc Reference column, the user indicated TM 1.22 as a corresponding reference to 9PAX 01. Under the Gap Analysis column, the user selected Variation for the training and job function being analyzed because this topic is not covered in the user's training manual. Step 2. Align Company Training Manual with AHM Chapter 11. Once the user determines they have one or multiple variations, the next course of action is to assess the need for change. Does the operator or ground service provider want to maintain the variation or variations? If no, align Own Training Manual with the Chapter 11 specification. This will result in being in conformity with Chapter 11. No further actions required. If yes, record the variation from Chapter 11 in the Action or Notes column. Any recorded variations will automatically appear on the dashboard, tab 6, in the list of variations. Example: variation for 9pack01 for check-in job function and 11pack01 for meet and greet function. The variations have been recorded for this topic. The user will indicate the reason for the variation, as well as any course of action under the Actions or Notes in the checklist. These notes will automatically appear on the dashboard in the list of variations. A list of variations, if applicable, must be maintained by the operator for communication to providers and providers' management and performance measurement. A list of variations, if applicable, must be maintained by the ground service provider for communication to operator or operators, management of respective customer airlines relationships. Awareness of local operational or regulatory variations imposed by respective authorities. Step 3. Training implementation. It is necessary to ensure that alignment of a company's training program with AHM Chapter 11 is handled within the company's documentation system. This means that changes are distributed and available to all relevant personnel, including the ground service providers, across the entire network of the airline. Only the current version of the training manual is used. Obsolete documentation is disposed of or archived. The documentation is updated in a timely manner. Once documentation is updated, the company needs to ensure that the relevant people are trained for the relevant changes made. Step 4. Keep content up to date. The AHM, including Chapter 11, is updated annually. Each company is responsible for updating all the relevant materials, procedures, training, etc., according to any changes that are issued to the documentation. IATA has deployed the global implementation of Chapter 11, which is comprised of 4 pillars. Chapter 11 Content Enhancement, Industry Recognition, Implementation Campaigns, Regulators Buy-in. The Ground Operations Training Program has been endorsed by IATA's Ground Operations Group as representing the minimum training requirements. It has been included into the Standard Ground Handling Agreement (SGHA) as an optional text and will become a requirement as of the 2023 version of the SGHA. For more upcoming workshops and webinars, please visit the following link.